Brandon Aiyuk has officially requested a trade from the 49ers, that according to Mike Garafolo of the NFL Network, and thus we bring Bonta back to the show. I told you we weren't going to get through the entire summer without talking.
I know. It's just wild. And you know what? I was just talking to a producer, and if I was doing my regular show this week at 95.78, we switched up the lineups. So the afternoon show's doing the mornings. Shasky and I are doing afternoons, and the afternoon guys are doing late afternoons. And so the news broke 5 minutes into our show where we had all this Joe Lacob stuff as he sat down with David Aldridge from The Athletic and obviously TNT and NBA TV. And so we're thinking, oh, man, we're going to talk about Warriors, what's going on with Podziemski and Kuminga, Lowry Markkanen, and the Aiyuk news hits. And look, let's be real. It's a negotiation ploy by Aiyuk. It's his last stand with the 49ers, but I absolutely understand his position. The guy needs to get paid, man. He's the most reliable receiver on this football team. And everybody else got paid, whether it was McCaffrey, whether it was Debo, whether it was Kittle, even Nick Bosa, who had a down year. And I would argue that Aiyuk was more impactful than Nick Bosa was last season. I mean, it's the news that keeps on giving, man. So I don't know what's going to happen here moving forward. I don't see the Niners trading no Craig, but who knows? Who the heck knows in this wacky league?
It's a wild, wild league, and there's so much to unpack with what you just said, and obviously you've been unpacking it for hours on end, so we really appreciate you giving us some time here. I will return the favor with, we actually recorded a Take Command, our Commanders podcast episode. It's the one I do, and Logan Paulson, who you know from his time out there and knows Kyle real well, we talked about this, and he had some stuff to say that I'll have to send you because I'm sure it'll be fodder for you guys tomorrow as we were breaking it down. But let me just start with the basics before we kind of get into some of the stuff that Logan and I talked about that I want to bounce off of you. What changed today? Because officially requested a trade versus whatever the heck he has been doing unofficial, being a pain in the butt to try to get traded unofficially, if you will. I say that endearingly, but what actually, in the way you see it, happened today, and did it change any of the facts on the ground for any of the parties involved?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I can't wait to hear that sound from you guys, you and Logan. Look, I've heard so many things, and mostly from the Aiyuk camp, and Brandon Aiyuk himself, and even heard from TJ Houshmandzadeh, former wide receiver with the Bengals, you guys know, of course, on those great Bengals teams, and he's worked out Brandon Aiyuk and knows him really, really well. Apparently, all right, if we just go back to a couple weeks after the Super Bowl, the Aiyuk camp approached the 49ers and say, all right, let's get this deal done. And the 49ers were like, okay, maybe let's talk. And then the Niners were maybe, you know what, let's just wait. We do business in the summer. Let's get through our draft or whatnot. Then we'll come back to you. And then the receiver market just exploded. And so it's Fat Joe always says, a famous rapper from New York City, yesterday's price isn't today's price. And so Brandon Aiyuk said, you know what, like the stock market, my stock has gone up because all these other guys like Nico Collins, Devontae Smith, and Jalen Waddle, they all have gotten paid. So then Aiyuk, about a month ago, if I want to say, finally came back and met with the 49ers. And apparently things are going to be kumbaya. They sat down and met. They all agreed that they still want to remain partners. Aiyuk still wants to play with the 49ers. And this is after the Pivot podcast with Ryan Clark. So whatever's happened since then, maybe the 49ers have taken a stance saying we're not going above a certain number. And from what I hear, that number could be $26 million a year, could be $25 a year. But Brandon Aiyuk's probably looking at Debo's contract. And Debo's very impactful. Now everybody's going crazy over the receiver documentary on Netflix, but Debo's making $28.6 million this year. Brandon Aiyuk's in line to make $14 million guaranteed. Now it's not tough change in our world. You know, we're scrambling for pennies and nickels and dimes in our world, right? But in their world, Aiyuk probably believes Debo's not $14 million better than me. I made second team All-Pro. I was seventh in the league in receiving yards. I want to get paid. You paid everybody else. And now we're here. So I think it's a last-ditch effort for Brandon Aiyuk to try to get a contract done before training camp. Or now he's like, look, you don't want to pay me. Just trade me now so I can join a new team for the start of their training camp.
So how much of this is about the timing, Bonta? Because if you look at the 49ers cap table, which I've tried to do over the last day here or the last couple of hours here in prepping for talking about all this, there are some guys that come off the books or could come off the books, including, by the way, Debo Samuel after this season, where you could create some more cap space, and perhaps after the season where they can see how Debo plays, how Aiyuk plays, how these guys play for one more year, it seems perfectly feasible to then pay Brandon Aiyuk. How much of this for the Niners is not potentially we don't want to pay you, but we don't want to pay you right now?
I I think it's the latter right there, what you said. We don't want to pay you right now. And then they're also thinking about Brock Purdy next season. And what Brock Purdy could possibly command, where you look at Joe Burrow making $55 million a season. I don't think Brock Purdy is on Joe Burrow's level. I do believe Brock Purdy's a top 10 quarterback. However, if you took a weapon like Brandon Aiyuk away from him, how good is Brock Purdy? I think there's some facts to that. But it is, hey, we have Tarvarius Ward, we have Deommodore Lenoir, Talanoa Hufanga. What is going to happen with Trent Williams? Do we want to extend George Kittle, who's 31 years old? Deebo Samuel, who didn't finish 2 of the 3 playoff games for the 49ers this past postseason. Can you count on him to play 17 games plus the playoffs? So it's a lot of that baked into it. But also they may just look at Brandon Aiyuk and say, well, we could find another Brandon Aiyuk somewhere else. And I would argue that you probably can't, because you tried it with Dante Pettis. You tried Kendrick Bourne. You tried Jalen Hurd. You tried all these wide receivers, Trent Taylor, Richie James Jr., and it hasn't worked out. He's your first back-to-back 1,000-yard wide receiver since Anquan Bolden, and before that, it was T.O. I mean, we haven't had a great tradition at wide receiver outside of T.O. and Jerry Rice in a number of years. Crabtree gave us a season. Bolden gave us a couple seasons. That's about it outside of Deebo Samuel 2021 season, in which he really made his impact as a running back more so as a wide receiver. So I think Shanahan and company are maybe being stubborn, and they probably don't like the way Aiyuk is taking things publicly, Instagram, social media, the podcast or whatnot. But mind you, Deebo Samuel did the same damn thing in 2021 before when he wanted his new money, where he's in a club, throat slashes, saying, yeah, I'm done with the Niners, and actually talked to the New York Jets about a trade. So, it's not just Aiyuk either. Like, we got to remember, Deebo has actually addressed the media and said, look, my agent called me, and I knew my name was in trade rumors, and the 49ers were receiving calls on not only Brandon Aiyuk, but also Deebo Samuel, because of what the cap may look like for the 49ers next season. So it's a lot on our mind, the future of the 49ers and how to build this team around Brock Purdy and Christian McCaffrey.
Well, that's kind of the thing, Bonta, right? Is like, if I'm John Lynch and I can just hold steady this year, I would rather have another year of information. Like, I get it's the NFL. Like, if you can get a new deal and get more money now and a signing bonus for Aiyuk, like, of course you want more money now. Get it in my bank account, please. There's no guarantees. But if I'm Lynch, I'm like, you're under contract, buddy, and we're trying to win a Super Bowl, and next year, like, we're going to have another year's worth of information on all of those gooses. Because, like, if Trent retires, the cap situation looks completely different. So there's all those factors. So I'm curious, as you took calls on your show today, where the fan base came down on all of this.
I would say 65-35, they're pro-Lynch, Shanahan, and not giving Aiyuk this extension right now. And they weren't necessarily saying trade him, but they were basically saying, like, he's the 3rd or 4th or 5th most impactful player on offense. Now, I was taking a position, and I truly believe this, Aiyuk is the best downfield threat for this football team. He's the one guy who can get separation. I think at times he gets underutilized in this offense. I'm a big Deebo fan, but I watched the Super Bowl, and I was there in the Super Bowl where he couldn't gain separation, and he couldn't get off a press jam. Now, do defenses fear Deebo a little more than Aiyuk? Probably, because of the way he can move with the football in his hands. He's just a playmaker where you get the ball in his hands, it can make things happen. But if you are Lynch and you're taking his position, it's like, hey, look, we do reward our players, but we need another year. Our books are not in order. Now, again, I get it from Lynch, and I get it from Shanahan, I get it from the 49ers. But I also understand Brandon Aiyuk wanting the money now, because we just watched this receiver doc. We watch Hard Knocks. We watch the NFL every single Sunday. You could get hurt in training camp. You could tear an ACL in training camp. You could tear your Achilles in the practice. You could do it in the game. And then what happens to your value? Then what type of money are you getting? Are you going to be working on one-year contracts? Or are you going to be working on a long-term deal where you get the money, all the guaranteed money like these other receivers did this past offseason? So I do understand both angles of it, but the fans are pro-49ers. They're saying, are you getting camp or else? And look, if it wasn't for the receiver doc, I think fans will still be in on Deebo for the way he acted. Fans are kind of out on Nick Bosa for the way he held out in training camp and then used all the excuses in the world all throughout the season saying, well, I didn't have a training camp and I'm a little sluggish in this. And that's like, wait a minute. We don't want to hear it. You stuck the Niners for the richest defensive deal in NFL history. So the fans are definitely, I would say 65% of them from the calls I took today are out on Brandon Aiyuk and saying, dude, just play ball or we can find another Brandon Aiyuk.
Bonta Hill, 95.7 The Game with us here on the Hoffman Show. So to that end, here's kind of the preview version of what Logan and I talked about from the schematics and from a guy in Logan who played for Kyle and knows that offense really well. And actually, I'm the one who brought this up, Bonta, because of the receiver doc that you've mentioned now, the Netflix show for those that haven't seen it. And there's this phenomenal, like, kind of clarifying quote from Kyle in there after Debo goes out one of the times he missed last season. And Kyle goes, well, when he's out, it's not like we run the same plays with our backup Debo. And that, to me, speaks to why Samuel is so valuable, why McCaffrey is so valuable, why Kittle and Juszczyk are so valuable. And I think when you look at Aiyuk, he's exceptional at what he does, but what he does is more replicable. And the other name that we haven't mentioned yet that if I'm Lynch, I'm like, I'm not going to say this out loud, but I want to see is Ricky Pearsall. Super technical route runner, first-round pick out of Florida, that if he all of a sudden looks like he can do what we need to with those other guys around, well, then I don't want to pay Brandon Aiyuk because I can get most of the production. How do you kind of make sense of that as someone who watches this team with a much closer eye week in, week out, of kind of those specialists? The Kittle is super unique to his position. Juszczyk, fullback who can play tight end, Debo, McCaffrey, and then Aiyuk, who's just a receiver.
Oh, I agree with you 100% on that assessment because something I've argued with the fans about. It's funny that now people are coming back at me on my show saying, well, Debo's too valuable for the team. And I remember going into the Jacksonville game when the Niners were on a 3-game losing streak. And people were crying like, Debo, we should flip him. He's just another running back. He's redundant to what McCaffrey does. And I said, folks, the defense reacts differently when McCaffrey and Debo's on the field. Why would you want to get rid of a playmaker like that? Why don't you add to that? Add to Debo, add to McCaffrey, add to Kittle. And that's where Brandon Aiyuk comes in, and he does benefit off of them. However, when it comes to the vertical passing game, when you need to make a play, third down, some of these key third downs late in the game, whether it's the Green Bay playoff game last season, whether it's the miracle catch against the Detroit Lions in the NFC Championship game, whether it's the divisional round game against the Cowboys 2 seasons ago on third down where Aiyuk's coming up with big plays, Brock Purdy loves himself some Brandon Aiyuk. The guy's a second-team All-Pro. For crying out loud. Now, I'm not talking Pro Bowl. I'm talking about second-team All-Pro where we have all these legit wide receivers. However, Shanahan acknowledging that, hey, half our game plan is with Debo. But, at times I see a game plan with Brandon Aiyuk, like Pittsburgh in Week 1 last season, where Brandon Aiyuk gets 8 targets and catches all 8 of the targets. And another aspect is, the Niners are 32nd in league in passing the ball, right, in terms of, like, pass attempts. They're a run-first team. They want to play a physical brand of football. They want to run the ball down your throat. They want to get the 30 carries. They want to do all that. But guess what? Brandon Aiyuk, in this offense, he gets down and dirty. And I think people overlook it because it's not sexy, which is why we never talk offensive line on sports radio, right? Brandon Aiyuk gets down and dirty.
I don't know what you guys are doing out there. We talk about it all the time here, Bonta. I mean, don't you dare just respect this dork of a show over here.
Oh, I love me some offensive line talk. So when you look at all those big Christian McCaffrey runs last year, whether it's Pittsburgh, whether it's Arizona, first play of the game, or Seattle, Brandon Aiyuk is blocking his ass off down the field, a la Jerry Rice, a la John Taylor. I'm not calling them those players, but that's what they did with those great 49er teams back in the day. And that's what Brandon Aiyuk does. He's a complete wide receiver. Is it flashy? No, but he's super consistent. So to your point about, hey, we got to build a game plan around Debo, that's all fine and dandy. But you also know that you can't count on Debo to play every single game and every single snap. Again, he gets hurt because of the way he plays. Kittle gets hurt because of the way he plays. Hell, Kittle wasn't even available for the possession in overtime for the 49ers against Kansas City because he was hurt. Debo was taking a knee. He didn't finish 2 of the last 3 playoff games. Brandon Aiyuk has been durable. He has been consistent. And moving forward, I think, and it comes to Brock Purdy. How do you surround Brock Purdy? Okay, you have the left tackle Trent Williams, probably on his last legs. You still have Christian McCaffrey, but we know running backs get hurt. And there is concern about all the touches he had last season. How does that hinder his performance this year? Will you give him a blow? Will you kind of lessen the load for Christian McCaffrey? But moving forward in the passing game, I got to roll with Aiyuk for Brock Purdy and that rapport that they have over Debo Samuel.
Bonta Hill, 95.7 The Game. Bonta, if people want to hear any of the local coverage today, because you guys mixed all your shows around, how'd you guys handle the podcast? What should people search in the Odyssey app if they want to podcast your show today?
You could go Odyssey app. You could go YouTube at 95.7 The Game /Morning Roast. We'll be right there on my big, ugly face along with Joe Shasky. We basically talked 4 hours. But let me ask you this before we get off the air, Craig. Does Washington fans, do Commander fans want Brandon Aiyuk? Because something today that I was throwing out was like, what if the Commanders and Niners came to an agreement and just swapped Terry McLaurin for Brandon Aiyuk. Is that a thing out there? I have no idea, but is that a thing?
That's a fascinating question. Like player for player straight up. I am hesitant on doing that, but I'm such a sucker for Terry as a dude. Like he's just A plus. And I think with what they're trying to build from a character standpoint and the captain and all that, to like take a guy who represents everything you want as you're trying to establish a new culture and trade him, probably not ideal, even if Aiyuk represents a lot of that same stuff and AP knows him obviously very well. I think generally speaking, the fan base is kind of split. Giving up draft capital at this point in the rebuild, tough sell. Paying a guy $30 million, I think is a bit of a tough sell when you're already paying Terry. But there's also people that are like, hey, this is Jaden's best friend. Jaden's on a rookie contract. You got the cap space to do whatever you want because they got more cap space than anyone else in the whole league, I'm pretty sure still. So, I don't know. To be honest, Bonta, I'm torn. So, I represent the fan base here. Just most of them are calling very vehemently on one side or the other, and I'm stuck somewhere in the middle.
Sounds like me.
Yeah,
Sounds like a sports talk radio host.
Right. People think we have the strong takes. No, we just sit on the receiving end of the strongest ones of all. Bonta Hill, so youtube.com or 95.7 The Game, The Morning Roast on YouTube. Search that in the Odyssey app as well, and you can catch Bonta's show from earlier today. Bonta, always appreciate it, sir, and we'll see what next Bay Area Commanders / Washington, D.C. adjacent news breaks next.
Just don't ask me about Jordan Poole no more. I apologize to everybody out there.
Yep, we did. We've been got it covered. All set. Yep. All right.
And please send me that podcast with you and Logan. I can't wait to hear it because we'll be playing that tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll make sure you get a link as soon as it gets up. It's Bonta Hill, everybody. Appreciate you, sir. That is Bonta with us here on the Hoffman Show.
This is the Hoffman Show on the T980 and the Odyssey app.